we're talking right now, I know that you said that the Citizens Against Eversource Facebook group had grown. Has it grown even more since you last
Yes.
talked?
So now we're close to 30,000 members now.
And what type of chatter have you seen since then? Even just in recent days, what have people been communicating with each other about?
Well, I'll be frank. I mean, it's disheartening at times, because we were at the protest about a week past, and that's when the DPU was ruling on the $5 billion monies for Mass Save, and they ended up ruling in favor of passing it. They did decrease it a bit to 4.5 billion, but the issue was that if you look back, in the records, the previous budget for Mass Save was 4 billion. So it still went up $500 million, which means that it's about 12% of an increase from the past 3 years in regards to that budget. And so we're expecting to see somewhere in the vicinity of a 12% increase in our delivery fees as well. And so in that respect, that's a little bit of a blow, but in the other sense, we just got started as far as our movement is concerned, and we got the DPU and the legislature and those governing bodies to back off about $500 million. So there is a silver lining in a lot of these things, and the fact that we just got our movement going and we're able to get $500 million wiped off from the books. Not just us, but many people collectively reaching out to these governing bodies. That's something great as well.
And you've followed Maura Healey addressing the DPU to do something about it. Do you think that helped at all, her taking a stand and speaking out about it?
Maura Healey played no part whatsoever other than her grandstanding for the media. I mean, at the end of the day, she's doing her media runs because she's either preparing herself for a presidential bid or, just a continuation of her current tyranny. But the reality is that we can see by the policies that she signed, specifically S-2967 that she signed on November 21st, which is another double down on more infrastructure increases for Eversource backed by the ratepayers. And so she can say whatever she wants in front of the cameras. But when we look at, for instance, her budget or H1, which is going to add some significant fees to, every, energy consumer, in 2026. I mean, that's what we look at. So she can say whatever she wants and she can pretend to care. But when she's signing bills, and assisting the legislature in passing bills that only increase the, economic stifling to the ratepayers, well, it's obvious that the proof is in the pudding that she really does not care about the consumer. She cares about protecting her image and maintaining her power in her seat.
So that's how you feel about tomorrow when she makes an announcement, these efforts that she's announcing to lower energy bills?
Well, at the end of the day, she has that meeting tomorrow in Lowell, and she's going to pretend like she cares, about helping people. But the reality is that, like I said, everything she's done to this point has been chicanery or trickery, right? When she announced the 5% and 10% reductions, well, when you read the fine print, it turns out that they're not reductions, they're deferments. And additionally, they had, interest attached to them. So not only was it not a reduction, it was a deferment plus interest. So they were going to make profit off the backs of, suffering Massachusetts residents. And so tomorrow, when she goes out there and she trots out there, and like I said, there's been a lot of blowback for her in regards to, these rate increases. And so as a political figure, she's trying to clean up her image a little bit, in order to deceive the masses further so that she can retain her power. But I will imagine, and I'm going to declare it here now, that tomorrow she's probably going to announce, that she's going to be putting some savings in place to lower income families, right? The only problem with that is that there's been no tax money, no additional tax money, no budgetary money allocated towards savings to, Massachusetts residents. And so where will this money come from? And typically what ends up happening is, they'll say, hey, we're going to reduce rates. We're going to reduce the rates of electricity, right, of the supply, but they'll just increase the delivery prices. So It's typically a game of three-card Monte when it comes to Maura Healey and her administration. And so when she says she's going to lower the price of electricity, or whether it's gas, for lower income families, it's most likely going to come from middle income families. And the problem is that middle income families are also suffering. I mean, sometimes they do have bigger homes, and those bigger homes means bigger bills, and those bigger bills are not sustainable. And so she isn't attacking the issue at the root, which, one of the major issues is that this regulated monopoly, Eversource and National Grid, they've been allowed to run rampant within the system, all facilitated by the DPU and the legislature. And there are some legislations that allow that. And so the root would be attacking those legislations, changing such things. For instance, the decoupling that happened in 2008, when that passed, it allowed them to further run rampant, because a lot of the things that Eversource tries to put on their balance sheet to the consumer and pass to the consumer has been facilitated by this decoupling. And so if a movement to recouple were to happen, which is basically, in essence, it means that they're not allowed to tack on their fees. For instance, they have a petition that's out now that they're asking for millions and millions of dollars for storm damage that happened in a variety of years. Well, with a normal company and their storm teams that they send out, right, to maintain their systems, they take that hit, right, and it takes a hit in their profits. Well, we know that Eversource is very profitable, and we know that by the shareholders in their white pages, but for whatever reason, because of the decoupling that happened, they're not taking those hits on their balance sheets. They're guaranteed specific profits because of that provision and that legislation that was passed. So if she really wanted to do something, she would start attacking these legislations that facilitate, their predatory pricing and, the subjugating of consumers through the extraneous fees, aided by the legislature.
I appreciate the input on that. I know that recently you held a protest. But what else do you have coming up that you plan to mobilize your base? Do you have any plans in the works to continue this fight?
Absolutely. And so, like I said, that the protest that happened, that was fantastic. It opened my eyes to another element, which is you fully get to meet these people in person. And, when you really get to know their stories, you really understand what you're fighting for. As far as things to come, we do have another protest that's going to be coming up on the 22nd at South Station in Boston. And this one's going to be a bit bigger. We've had some more time to plan. And basically, we're going to be, highlighting some of these issues that I just mentioned in regards to the recoupling and decoupling, right? Decoupling is what allows them and facilitates them to, not have to pay their burden in order to remain profitable, and put that, on the backs of ratepayers. And so that's going to be one of the main focuses of this upcoming protest. But there are some other things that I'm focused on, which is, in regards to, because at the end of the day, our movement isn't just about energy. It's about the corruption that's been entrenched within the legislature and within the administration. And what I mean by that is, when the voters passed ballot question 1 at a rate of 72%, and we're no longer then allowed to have that provision go through because the legislature, the very people that we voted to be audited, isn't getting audited. They're allowed to block it. And when we turn to Attorney General Campbell, who is supposed to represent the people, I mean, she's dragging her feet. She isn't doing a thing. What she's doing is she's grandstanding, and now she's tried to, make this a witch hunt for Diana DeSousa. And the reality is, this isn't about Diana DeSousa. She is just a vehicle for the people in regards to that audit. The people voted for that audit. Campbell has a responsibility to the people to make sure that audit goes through so that the people can have what they voted for. That's what this democracy is based on, right? Democratic principles. And so instead of doing her job and representing the people in this fight, she's trying to politicize this and turn this into a Diana DeSousa versus, the legislature. And that's what this was about. Diana DeSousa is only doing what the voters voted for her to do. And so the reality is Campbell going to stop grandstanding and do her job, protect residents of Massachusetts, and enforce the law that came into law, it is law, it is statutory, it is law. Once the voters voted on that ballot, it became law. So is she going to defend the people and push through so that the legislature can have audit? 46 other states in Massachusetts have audits. So this isn't a new thing. This isn't a separation of powers thing. That's just more, song and dance. And so the voters, they know what this is. She knows what this is. She's trying to buy time for God knows what, and it's starting to make voters believe that she's not on the voter's side. And, if there's a breakdown in democracy of that magnitude, then we've got a lot of bigger problems. And so hopefully she will do her job, which she's been elected to do, and represent the people in this matter and make sure that that legislative ballot initiative that was passed on goes through, and she does everything in her power to push that forward and make sure the legislature gets audited. And so, like I said, we do have a lot of projects in the works, that being one of them, and some other fights that we're going to be taking up for the people. But like I said, unfortunately, every time we turn around, there's something going on, and it's a shame that we've gone to this point. But we're going to do whatever it takes to make sure that we not only discover it, but put actions in place to not only fix it, but make sure that these things don't ever happen again.
It's good that you all have plans in the works and you're going to continue this. And I know that you're very hard charging when it comes to this matter. Just to take the pulse of how people are feeling with the rates, are they still feeling the pain of their energy bills? Just going back to that, are they still struggling to make ends meet with this, or has there been any improvement since?
Well, I'll say 1,000,000% they're still feeling it, right? And not only are they still feeling it, they're fully aware that this is just a deferment, a 10% deferment in regards to that adjustment. So, it's not a reduction. They're just kicking the can down the street. And, when summer bills come in and the air conditioners start kicking on and they're all run by electricity, and the reality is they're going to feel it in that respect too. So, this fabrication that, kicking it down the street is going to make it easier for them. It's just an illusion, and an illusion that, we're unwilling to delude ourselves of. And so, when it comes to electricity, it's something that the legislature, especially Maura Healey, is unwilling to talk about. As we've seen in many of the press briefings, they always focus on gas, because they want to make gas the enemy. But imagine, right, if we were in a situation now because of these hastened green initiatives where electricity was our only option. I mean, we would all be bankrupt. We wouldn't have houses that would need energy because we wouldn't have houses. And so the idea that the legislature is hastening this net zero initiative, and like I said, I stand for clean energy. There's nothing wrong with that. But here's the thing. You have to do the proper economic threshold studies, and you have to make sure that when you put these initiatives in place, they aren't going to cripple your residents, right? And so when these initiatives were put into play, or the idea of them, they had a target of 2050. But the thing is, did they take into account COVID and the inflation that happened thereafter, the shrinking of the economy, the bankrupting of many, Massachusetts residents that are still struggling to get back on their feet? And so they didn't adjust for that terrible hit that we took in our economy. They didn't reevaluate, the economy. There was no economic threshold studies done after COVID. And so they're still keeping to that end in regards to their initiative to go green. Why? Well, because they have financial backers in that sector. But that's another story for another day. But the reality is, if we had been at this point pigeonholed into only having electricity, imagine how defunct our society would be. Thank God we still have some gas, even though Maura Healey blocked 2 pipelines. Thank God we still have oil, even though they're making a push to try to, take that away from consumers as well. Thank God that we don't have, charging stations with electric cars everywhere, because our grid and our ratepayers couldn't take those chargers. They can't take them now. I mean, look at what's happening in the solar sector, where they promise people that if you set up all these solar panels and etc., they're going to have better pricing. But what ends up happening is, when solar is all set up to meet their energy goals via electricity only, they raise the rates. So no matter what infrastructure that they put on the ratepayers' back to drive through their initiatives, it always ends up that they end up finding a way to, impoverish the ratepayers, to impoverish Massachusetts residents. And, this dream and this fantasy that, going completely green is the solution. Well, we can see right now in a small event here that we just had that it isn't the solution, that we need a multi-pronged effect when it comes to energy, that the solution isn't eliminating competition, because when you eliminate competition, the only people that benefit from that is Eversource and the monopolies that are allowed to run in this state, and that would be Eversource and National Grid, which is pretty much the same company. And so, like I said, if she really cares about Massachusetts residents, she will give us choice and allow us to have choice. But shoving this, green initiative down our throats at the expense of Massachusetts residents, and impoverishing their families and causing irreparable economic damage. I mean, that's not a responsible way for any administration, any governing body to instill any sort of new policies or practices. And so, like I said, the proof is in the pudding. And so, like I said, I care about American families, and I would never do that to people, Would anybody? Would anybody, would stifling people economically and putting them, into Chapter 13, is that what a governing body does that cares about people?
And, you brought up a lot of great points, and a lot of great points that I probably can't, mention in this story. So I know we are looking ahead to what she's doing tomorrow, and I think you've covered that. Anything else that you wanted to mention about, I guess, anything that we haven't covered just yet that you wanted to talk about?
Well, like I said, I want to put it back on energy, right? And electricity specifically, because, no matter how many times I've spoken about electricity, they fail to mention it. Any of her policies, she always focuses on gas. And why is that? Because she needs to make gas the big bad wolf, okay? But the reality is, gas isn't the big bad wolf. The big bad wolf is when administrations are too hasty in enforcing, their own initiatives, and they don't consider the ratepayers or Massachusetts residents as the primary, concern within their policies, And we need to get away from this practice of things being political, of things being partisan. Because at the end of the day, Massachusetts residents are bipartisan. And at the end of the day, we all need capital, whether we're blue or red. And the idea that she can push these initiatives based on, financial backers, cushy board seats, golden parachutes, promises of stock dividends when, she retires from the political realm, which we understand how politics work. Well, that's not very selfless at all. And so, I want to caution all these governing bodies to be aware that the people are aware of the legislatures and their fallacies. The people are aware of the legislatures and in their complacency. And when it comes to voting time in 2026, they're not going to forget. And it's a 30-day bill cycle with these energy bills. They're going to remember every 30 days that their legislature, that their governor is not there for them. And that's going to pave the way for a new movement, for an administration that cares about the people and puts the people's first instead of putting their political agendas first.
An unrelated note, are you still having to close your doors? I know that you were taking some measures yourself to keep the costs down. Are you doing anything still to keep those costs low?
Well, like I said, it's getting a little bit warmer now, but here's the thing, right? How do I make up the money that I lost January and February, right? December, January, how do I make up that money? The economy is not going up. My pay isn't going up to match the rate of inflation. My pay isn't going up to match the rate of these increasing fees and delivery fees and et cetera, and increasing energy fees. And so, there's no way for me to make up except for cutting back, and gladly, I had the benefit of being able to cut back enough to still make ends meet. But what about, lower income families? What about other sects of society? What about other people that are in different positions and economical positions than I am? They may not have options, and a lot of them are putting a lot of these bills on their credit cards. And those credit cards have fees attached and interest rates attached. And they're just digging a hole deeper and deeper. And all Maura Healey does is say, hey, here's a shovel. And that's not the kind of leadership Massachusetts need, and I think we can all agree on that.
Elijah, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it.